Hello, everyone. My name is Shridhar Pandey. I am a senior product manager on AWS Lambda. On Lambda, I own the monitoring observability uh, areas along with the integrations for operational ISV ecosystem as well. And today I'm going to be talking about a new feature that we launched last year called Lambda Extensions. So let's get going. Can we go to the next slide? Awesome. So today it's going to be a brief session, and I'm going to talk about a few different things. So first of all, why we built Lambda extensions, and then an overview of what they are and what are some of the use cases they address. And I'm going to close it with how to get started using extensions. So let's go to the next slide, please. So why we built Lambda extensions. So there were a few different reasons, but the core of them all was that we wanted to enable our customers to be able to use their preferred operational tools on Lambda without any additional operational burden and required to and having to do heavyweight configuration and so on. So the philosophy is that you should be able to focus on building your application logic and leave the undifferentiated heavy lifting to tooling and tooling vendors who specialize in this. And that was kind of the origin story for it. So we also heard from customers that they needed to put an additional effort to run operational tools, and it was something that they were looking for us to provide ways to simplify. So we set out on a path to build an ecosystem of operational tools around Lambda that will make it easier for organizations and customers to bring tooling that they already may have been using with their applications to Lambda, and also if they wanted to build their own tooling, it should be easier for them. So with that in mind, we launched Lambda extensions last year. We GA'd in October 2020, and we previewed in October 2020, and we GA'd in May of 2021. Lambda extensions, in the simplest possible way, is a new way for various tools, various operational tools, either your own or provided by different ISVs, tooling vendors, to integrate closely with deeply with the Lambda execution environment. The execution environment is where your code, your Lambda function code runs. The purpose is to make it simple to configure and install these tools, and extensions enable you to do that. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And the various use cases that we envisioned for extensions were monitoring, observability, security, and governance. And we've seen customers have been using those, and various Lambda partners and our ISV tooling partners have built and support extensions for these use cases. And we've also seen some pretty interesting use cases apart from these as well. For example, for managing secrets with Lambda, and some have used it for things such as integrating open policy agents. So what are extensions under the hood, and how do they work? So the pictures you see here, starting from left, is the picture. The box on left with the Lambda sign on it is the Lambda service, or things that run the Lambda service. And on the right hand side, you have a few different boxes, but overall they represent the execution environment. The execution environment, like I said, is where your function code runs, where the runtime code runs, and in this world where the extension code runs. So the platform actually initiates and initializes the execution environment, and and manages the execution environment's lifecycle. And the execution environment communicates with the platform via some APIs. One of them is the runtime API, and with extensions we launched some additional APIs. But before we get into those APIs, let's also look at what exactly I mean by that. So as you can see, before in pre extensions world, the runtime and the function code would communicate with the platform using the runtime API. With extension, now you can run tool or agent in parallel with the runtime and the function code. So this does not sit inside the function code. Rather, it runs in parallel with an agent, and it communicates with the Lambda platform or the Lambda service through a new API. Well, not new anymore, but new when we launched the extensions API. And so you can run this agent throughout the life cycle of whenever your function is being executed. In fact, the extension can get initialized even before the function code is initialized. So anything that's in your init block, extension code can get initialized before that. It can run in parallel while the function invocation is running, and it can continue to run even after the function code has returned the response. For cleanup task, or even for things such as maybe the extension is collecting telemetry data or monitoring data in parallel with the function, and after the function is done running and the response has been returned, the extension could use the time after the invocation completion to send the response back to a backend. And this is kind of a common model how we see various extension builders or extension authors use extensions. In addition to that, we also introduced a new thing called logs API, which is pretty cool. So today, what happens when you're running a Lambda function is the Lambda service generates logs by default, the logs that are generated by your function code, as well as the logs generated by the Lambda service. You would recognize the logs generated by the service in form of start and then report lines. And Lambda by default streams it to CloudWatch logs. So with logs API, what we did was we also made it available to the extensions directly. So what that means in essence is, if you're running an extension within the Lambda execution environment and you want to collect logs and send it to your backend, you can also send it. You don't necessarily have to go to CloudWatch logs to collect the logs for your function invocation. So that was another thing that we launched, in addition to the extensions API. So the extensions API and logs API collectively are part of the extensions offering. So and let's dive into a little bit of what a timeline or how it is represented in terms of life cycle in the next slide. So as you can see here, first of all, the line that says what's managed by Lambda service and what's managed by your extensions and your code, that line kind of talks about a little bit about the shared responsibility model of AWS Lambda, which is the platform and anything running in the platform is managed by the Lambda service, and the code that you bring, including the extensions, are your responsibility to manage. So if you start looking from the left, you will see that the extension initialization starts before the runtime or even the function. Before the function code is initialized or even the runtime is initialized, and the initialization phase ends when the function code, in the runtime and the extension initialization have completed, or it has reached timeout, whichever happens first. Once that happens, once it is initialized, and let's say an invocation or request comes in, which would be a warm invoke, assuming that the function was initialized properly, you see that there is the function and the extension are running in parallel, and you'd see a series of invokes. So in the second block, you would see that the function invocation has completed, but the extension is still processing, and that's what I meant when I said that the extension can continue to run even after the function code is done initializing. So and with extension, and moving on to the third block on the right. So with extension, we also made the shutdown phase available, visible and available to the extension. So what does this mean? When the execution environment is being spun down, there are certain processes that the runtime runs to complete the shutdown. During this phase, the Lambda service will make compute time available to extension code up to 2 seconds, depending on how, if you're depending on certain factors, but it could be up to 2 seconds for you to do cleanup, which could be closing database connections if you had any, or sending leftover monitoring data that you may have collected over past few invocations that you were not able to send out, or or simply just closing out, releasing locks on any objects that you have locked, and so on. So those this is not available today to functions that do not have extensions. So this is exclusively available to extensions. And so that was how, the life cycle of a function with extension looks like. Now let's move on to talk about how you can use extension in the next slide. So there are a few different ways for you to use extensions. So first of all, like I mentioned earlier, you can build your own, or you could use ready-to-use extensions from various tooling vendors, which are our partners. Today, so starting from the top, you can use, there are AWS services such as CloudWatch. They have an extension called Lambda CloudWatch Lambda Insights, which most of you must have heard of. AWS App Config also has an extension that can let you do feature flagging and other cool things. AWS Code Guru Profiler extension helps you profile your code, profile your function code. And AWS distro of OpenTelemetry, which is our distro that provides OpenTelemetry collector for Lambda functions, is the collector is also packaged as an extension. In addition to that, we have several ISV partners that have that have gone through a process where we have looked and certified their offerings built on extensions, and you can use it directly from them. And all you would have to do in most of those cases would be to include your extensions provided as layers within your function code, and you'll be within your function configuration, and you'll be good to go. And then there are some open source projects as well, open source extensions that you can download and and you can run as your own. And if you're still not able to find a good extension that fits your use case like a glove, you can build your own Lambda extension. And I've linked our documentation where you can go and read more about extensions, including what are some of the available extensions today, and get more insights into, with examples, into how to build and run your own extension. And that was all for the presentation. Thank you. And I believe the next one is from Nikhil. Thank you. I see there's a question that says, how much operational burden do you think can be offloaded by leveraging the extensions that are live right now? So it totally depends on the extension, right? For example, if you're trying to use an extension to for monitoring and observability use cases, then you can do it all using extension. So and similarly for if you're trying to collect logs using an extension, like I said, you can use the logs API. And to basically, going back to my point, is that you can, it depends on use cases. For the use cases that I mentioned, there are several extensions from various tooling providers that essentially take care of your use cases, be it collecting logs, ingesting metrics, or doing things such as just looking at the payload to see if there is anything nefarious in the payload that needs to be dealt with. And in those cases, they're doing a pretty good job. That at least that's what customers tell us. So yeah, depends on the use case. Was that all the questions? All right.